Our next session will be a one-on-one discussion with Mr. Nikhil Gandhi, VP, the Walt Disney Company, India. May I please call upon Mr. Gandhi on stage, please?
एक परफेक्ट रोड ट्रिप के लिए आपको क्या चाहिए?
A bag full of clothes, more clothes, my makeup kit, shoes, lots of shoes, jewelry, accessories, बहुत सारा entertainment, and I'm ready to go.
Oh really? What नहीं baby? What? Watch this rich daddy's girl go from riches to rags in the all-new Beg Borrow Steal, only on Bindas.
Okay, let's give another round of applause. Because of this man, we are having IDOS here. Thank you very much for supporting IDOS this year, Nikhil. 2 years ago, you broke away from India Cast, around 2 years ago. How has that been, the journey of going independent, distributing all that? You know, you're not really in the mainstream as people would perceive it. You don't have a GEC, which is a large money earner. So how has the journey been like as far as distributing the Disney channels in India? Give a little background on the bouquet that you're really...
Yeah, so actually, if you look at it, we unbundled with India Cast a year ago. It's not 2 years ago.
Sorry, a year ago. I stand corrected.
August 16 is when we took that decision, and it's been a year now. So the first thing that we wanted to do is to put the network out there for people to understand who we are, what do we stand as a business, and the value that we add as a bouquet. And in that whole thought process, the first step that we took was to educate the platforms, the partners, and bring out the fact that we are not just a bundle of channels, but we stand for a branded entertainment network. So we have great brands like Disney, Bindas, UTV, and Hungama. And we, in that sense, are leaders in the respective networks that we have. So we have the Kids Network, where we're the #1 in terms of market share. We have the Youth Network, there again, we are the #1 in terms of market share. And we have two formidable movie channels. So as a bouquet, we have a 6% market share in terms of viewership. And if you look at the way the broadcasters are stacking up, you have Star at the top of the pile with about 27, 28%, then you followed by Z at about 22, 23, Sony at about 15, 16, followed by the Network 18 group, and then it's us at about 6, 7%. And the player after that falls down to about almost 0.5%. So the fact is that we don't want to be in the neighborhood of the smaller players. We want to be in the neighborhood of the top guys. And rightly so, because if that's the kind of eyeballs we are delivering as a network, platforms need to understand the value that we bring to the table. And that was the first thing that we set out as our endeavor in year one.
Thank you for that. Now, so in terms of what are the first steps you took when you gained your independent distribution to be able to reinforce the message that you wanted to convey?
Yeah, so the first step, I mean, of course, we set up a team from scratch, which was in record time. We also had to go out to figure out what's the real kind of value that you can derive. Having been distributed by various people and partners over the last 10 years, this is the first time in a decade that we've set up distribution in-house. So it was a kind of challenging for me to understand, am I really getting the kind of value that we deserve? And when I started delving deeper into the details, I figured that there is a direct relationship between market share and CPS. So if you look at, I mean, these are numbers off the record that I got to know, that if you look at market share and the CPS of the channel, it's almost in the same vicinity. So if you map it on your X and Y axis, you can draw a line of regression. And the dots will fall above the line. So you had a Star obviously over-indexing the other leaders in the space. You had Z almost on the line. And we were slightly below the line, which means that I was not really getting the value that I delivered as a network. So the first endeavor and the targets set for the team were that go out and get that kind of value. At least educate the platforms that this is the kind of value that we need to derive. It's expected that if you're distributed by a partner, you're not really going to get what you want. But to understand what your real value is was the first challenge. So the best metric that I could bring to the table was comparing your CPS with your market share. And thankfully, there was a direct relationship to that. So we're out to try and correct that as much as possible. Year one has been a great year for us. There were many challenges.
What were the challenges? What was it? Was it perception? For a while, probably thought you were still being distributed by a erstwhile distribution partner. What were the challenges?
Yeah, so I mean, perception was one of them, but those challenges are easier to sort. You do a lot of marketing activities. You set up teams. You meet up with people, give them an understanding of what you are, and it takes time. Over a period of 1 year now, people understand who we are. But there was a lot of other challenges in terms of splitting values between us and India Cast, understanding the legalities of many deals that were already stuck in the past. We went down to understand in phase 4 or phase 3, before it got digitized, there were many operators who didn't even have a license. Forget about DAS, they didn't have a P&T license. So as a business, I cannot provide my signals to people who don't have a license. And so there was a lot of discovery. There was a lot of deeper understanding of what's happening on the ground. That coupled with the regulator coming up with, in hyperactive mode, tariff structures, regulations regarding interconnect agreements. Then you had the whole DAS 3, which was again challenged. So if you look at the whole ground, it's not even. There are many challenges from a regulatory perspective, from a ground reality perspective. The regulator keeps harping that it's a 97%, 93% digitization in phase 3, but my discussions with many of the operators was that it's hardly about 50 or 60%. So there are many realities that we had to overcome. And in that whole process, there was a lot of learnings, many unlearnings. And we realized that over time, at least in the first 6 months, people did come about to understand who we are as a business.
I understand. So how do you go about overcoming these challenges? Because it's like the Wild West, like in the US in the early days when cable was there. So you suddenly had this entire thing to look after yourself.
Yeah. So I think one of the business ethos that Disney carries is that we are very strong on processes. We had a very strong back-end integrated process through which we actually activate signals, deactivate signals. We are very strict and follow every rule to the T from a regulatory perspective. I think that was also in some way a challenge, but it was also a boon to us because it just set up all the loose ends were tightened in time. The easy part was the negotiation of the values. I think while it went through its own ups and downs and there were some random switch-offs by some partners, but over time we overcame those and they realized who we are. But I think the multiple facets in terms of regulation, in terms of the whole High Court order, in terms of doing RIO deals and not fixed fee deals, it's a madhouse out there, honestly. You mentioned about FDI not coming into the sector. I mean, if you look at the sector from a bird's eye view, I don't think even an Indian company would want to invest in the platform business because of the kind of regulatory pressures that it's under. So I think from a broadcaster perspective, the idea was to keep investing in great content and across the 3 clusters that we have. And to your point, to your earlier point about a GC, I don't believe that you necessarily need to have a GC to be a significant player. I think we are very smart about the way we want to run the business. We're extremely profitable, and we have some very sharp and target groups that we think add a lot of pester value, kids especially, youth being the other one. So the focus was manifold, is to keep investing in content, and that's what really is the way forward.
Yeah. How large is the independent distribution team now that you have, and how is it structured? Do you have the usual regional kind of setup, or is it structured differently?
Yeah, so I think we set up a very lean team to begin with. We have the usual structure of a national head with region heads and zonal heads below them. I think about 16 to 18 odd people is the distribution sales team. And then we have a team that's on contract basis, working across the country in many areas. And that's about a strength of 50. And that coupled with about 15 odd people in the operations side. So that's the strength of the team.
Fantastic, thank you. In terms of the challenges that linear broadcast television is facing in terms of distribution, what are those challenges?
I think the fundamental challenge is the disproportionate apportioning of revenues in the value chain. If you look at the value chain that's currently in the distribution business, the low end of the value chain takes away the larger chunk of the pie. And I think this is the only industry in which that happens. On top of that, you have a regulator who's trying to regulate price. I mean, I saw the gentleman from TRAI gloating over the fact that he's coming with a tariff structure for the industry. I don't think we need a regulator to come and regulate my price. I think I should have the independent charge to determine the price that I want. There are so many industries out there which are largely consumer facing. So I think if there is one thing I'd like to change in the business, it would be that I would like to change the disproportionate monetization in the value chain. We as broadcasters are committed to invest in great amount of content. If you look at the last 1 decade, not just us, many other companies like Star, Zee, Sony, etc. Have invested a great amount of content, and they keep doing that, and we all keep doing that as we progress. I mean, I can speak for Disney. We are a business. We have 4 kids channels. So our investment in content keeps going out. Disney as a company invested $1 billion in India, and then you hear about the fact that Star and Sony, etc. are now going out to invest so much more in cricket and content. And not just content, it's also about infrastructure and everything beyond that. So
employment, etc.
Absolutely. So, and then bandwidth and all of that. So I think we are all committed to deliver great amount of content. It has evolved over the last 10 years. If you look at the kind of shows that you see on television today are high on quality. They are all in HD, 4K. Per ep costs have gone up. You have multi-big names from an Amitabh to an Anil Kapoor and all of those guys on television. So content costs, in my opinion, will keep going up, and that's because we want to deliver superior content to the consumer. So that's one. 2 is, I think, somewhere down in this whole process of the battle between the broadcaster and the platform, I think we've lost the consumer. In terms of getting the consumer to start valuing content and in terms of paying up. So in some sense, I believe that it is the collective effort of the industry stakeholders to actually educate the consumer, get them to understand the value of content, and then thereby start getting them to start paying up for it. And that's when I believe your ARPUs will really start moving up.
Great, thanks. In terms of supposing there was something you could change in the entire TV distribution ecosystem, you said there's money is being kept at the lower end of the chain. What else would you like to change in the TV distribution ecosystem?
I think, fundamentally it all begins there. But the second part is, the regulation. It's just very challenging from that perspective for us to be regulated so deeply and extensively at every point. Right from quality of service or tariff structures to when you have an ad cap. And then on the other side, when you are also auctioning for great content in terms of sports, etc., you also have a regulation there. So when you're regulated so heavily across content, in terms of, not just content, but across the board, your business model starts becoming even more challenging. Having said that, I think there has been a certain amount of evolution over time. Digitization was the first step, but the true sense of digitization we all know is not really out there. The monetization still needs to kick in. In some pockets, in some areas it has. But I think regulation needs to go hand in hand with the ground reality, right? we are coming up with a regulation on price, new tariff structure on price. I'd like to understand first how many MSOs have actually started packaging and tiering, right? You'll find a bunch full of them or a handful of them in some areas. Secondly, do they have the middleware to actually implement a package? And do they have a back-end system? I can speak for Hathway because I understand they've done something with Oracle in terms of integrating their back-end. I spoke to Jagdish the other day, or maybe even Den. But I'm not sure about the other guys. So it's appalling that we've got a tariff structure coming out when my back-end and my ground reality is completely different. So even in terms of the RIO scheme, right? My team went out to sign some RIO deals. They did sign a few hundred RIO deals. But my question to them was, how are you going to implement your RIO deal? How are you going to build the platform? And because we had to follow the regulation to the T, which we do, we had no choice. So, my RIO deal is on paper. I don't think I can implement it. I can implement it. I don't think the platform can implement it, right? He's supposed to provide me subscriber numbers, which he doesn't. He's supposed to package me, he doesn't. He's supposed to provide me a fixed LCN position, he doesn't. So there are many challenges from that perspective. So I think regulation needs to be in terms of, real in terms of implementation. Secondly, I think it's all in piecemeal. There is no long-term view in terms of what we want to do as a business. So, in the last 5 years, if you look at the regulatory intervention, it's been very heavy. So that's the other thing that I'd like to change.
Yeah, thank you for that. And in terms of, the problem has been the ecosystem has not managed to get together. Most cases, the broadcasters have not been able to get together fully. They all have their own vested interest, as Tony said earlier. The cable operators have their own vested interests. So therefore, the regulator is intervening, which of course is not very great for the industry.
Well, I don't agree fully. I think what vested interest will the broadcaster have? If there is a disproportionate value chain that needs to be corrected, it needs to be corrected. We are running with a legacy of the fact that there's disproportion. But look at the DTH side. I don't think broadcasters are complaining. I think there's a lot of sophistication in terms of delivery of service, quality of service, tiering, packaging, transparency. A few random cases here and there. But I think overall, when you have half the business sophisticated, structured, in the right manner, why can't this half follow the same? Right? I understand that there is a LCO at the end, but if the LCO needs to evolve, that is the job of the broadcaster as well as the platform, and largely the MSO, because those are all his LCOs, right? And to Mr. Sharma's point yesterday that we'll give them a uniform, I don't think that's really going to help, because at a mindset level, it is the LCO who's going to actually educate the consumer to take the price up. I think a lot of that, I can tell you by experience, a couple of weeks back, my cable operator came home and told me, I'm going to change your box. And I asked him, what's the package? What are the kind of channels I can watch? He said, don't worry, everything is the same. I'm just changing a box. So I think, fundamentally, there are lots of things that need to change from a platform perspective. The broadcaster's interest is to ensure that all the stakeholders have the right value that they're out for. And nobody's asking to do it overnight. I think enough has been said. It's been almost 4 years since we got digitized, and we've not seen any great improvement. Yes, about 10 or 15 odd % I could say, but not beyond that.
Yeah, in the real estate sector, let's move to that. The broker community has been, a different breed itself. But even there, there's a new act come into real estate as far as the regulatory authority. Now, there's an entire movement where brokers are actually going to finishing schools. I was at a smart cities conference and a real estate conference in Delhi where they're actually going into finishing schools to get that veneer of sophistication so they can deal with the customer right. You're saying uniforms are not great, but if it's merged with the philosophy of customer service, I think that would be good for the industry. And what can the broadcast sector, in terms of making the cable operator look nice in the eyes of the customer, do? Could it be messaging on the networks? Could that be there where, could you all work together? So that, right now everyone blames LCO most of the time, whether it's the MSO, whether it's a broadcaster, whether it's a regulator. And he sometimes blames himself for being in business. because it's something which has happened for years together, and sometimes he enjoys his cloud. So what could we do to get that LCO to feel good about himself?
So I think there are many things. I mean, from a broker perspective in the real estate sector, I think he ensures that both the stakeholders get, the seller as well as the buyer get the right value for the transaction, and then he takes a cut on it. But he ensures that people feel a sense of satisfaction at the end of the day. I think from a cable operator perspective, not just the mindset, but overall sophistication in terms of conduct of business. You drive around Mumbai and you take a look at the sky. You'll see cobwebs of fiber optics all over buildings. That's not how we're supposed to run a cable business. I don't see that anywhere in the world that I travel. I was very hopeful that the DTH business will come and change a lot. It did to a certain extent, but there are many other businesses. I mean, the cable business is deeply entrenched in many areas. So, I was really hopeful also that Tony's business in terms of hits will come about and create some sophistication in terms of delivery. And I hope him luck that he continues with that endeavor going forward. So I think not just at an experience level with the consumer, but overall sophistication of business and delivery, educating consumers to build price, and I think that's the overall sense that I believe that the cable operator should come with.
Yeah. Where do you see revenues coming in for broadcasters? Is it going to come from cable or is it going to come from DTH, the subscription revenues? Where do you see them coming more going forward?
Well, I think they should be, in a sense, in equal state. As long as you have subscribers, you should pay the right price for content that is provided. Whether you're a DTH player or a hits player or a cable operator, I think revenue should be depending on the size of the business that you have. I mean, my estimates show about 50-odd million homes catered to by the DTH platforms and another 50-odd by the cable platforms. And then you have the analog businesses. So I think if they are 50-50, they should be in that sense. But because of tiering and because of delivery of service, quality, branding, I don't see a single cable operator going out and branding his business. I mean, of course, they're not national players. Some of them claim to be national players, but I don't see any brand building activity at all. So that evolution will take some time. So on the back of branding and all the other things, we do have a slightly overedge in terms of monetization from the DTH players. And rightly so, and I think they've done a great job put together. So I think the cable business needs to come about to that extent.
Yeah, and what potential do you see for the Disney India business as a standalone player going forward? I mean, where do you see it being 6% going to 8% to 10%, or do you see yourself in that space? And
yeah, I think we have some catch up to do in terms of our top line, and that process is on, and I believe in the next couple of years we'll be there. The vision that we carry is that we want to cater to specific sets of audiences and continue to be leaders in that space. Globally, we are leaders in the kids space and the family entertainment environment. We also have 2 youth brands. I think that's another demo that we think delivers certain amount of pester value when it comes to cable. So I think we are going to consolidate our strengths and work on our core competency going forward. And you will see a few more channels being launched in that space also.
Great. You also more like a holistic business. You're in merchandising, you've done theaters in recent times, you did motion pictures, which you've slowed down on now, which could get active at some stage in the future. You're doing distribution. So in that sense, insulated as a company. Is there a drive to make television also take the level of what your other businesses are?
Globally as a company, Disney creates stories, and then it creates characters and multiple businesses outside of it. I mean, if you look at an example being Frozen. Frozen was a $1.5 billion in terms of box office, and then we also created another business on the back of Frozen being the merchandising business, which is another $1.5 billion, and then you had an extension of that in the parks as well. So Yeah, we are uniquely poised. We are the only media company in India that has 4 different divisions and not just broadcasting. Broadcasting being a major part of it, of course, but we're the number one branded merchandising company in India. That turnover is almost 2,500 crores. We are also the number one gaming business in India with all the games that we provide to cable and no, sorry, now cable also now, and the mobile service providers. And of course, the studio business is fairly robust. Even the international movies that we showcase here we had a phenomenal year last year. Keeping the Bollywood aside, of course, we've taken a certain call on that recently. But I think overall, we are fairly, we have that added advantage. We will continue to create content that will have offshoots in different businesses. Case in point being, we, our shows on the kids channels, right? We have shows like Arjun, Gajubai, and they'll have an extension into merchandising, they'll have an extension into gaming, and so on and so forth. So that continues for us.
Great. Now we move on to OTT services. Do you think these services are going to make the mark in India? The business models are really not in place. Some of them are trying advertising. Some of them are trying SVOD. Some of them are trying TVOD. Do you think these will have a play? Amazon's coming with, I don't know, $500 million or $1 billion in investment on content with Prime Video.
I think the heart of OTT is actually bandwidth and speeds, right? I think I can see that there is a resolve to solve those with Jio coming in and all the other guys now coming about with new tariff structures and speeds. So I think in the next couple of years, yes, I personally feel that the OTT players will come about. But again, I think it's also about who's paying and how many of them are paying. Yes, it will cater to the top end of the spectrum in terms of the pyramid. You'll have that creamy layer. But if you're in that space trying to reach out to that top end, then your pricing will have to be in that same space. I'm not sure about the numbers on Netflix today.
Very limited, less than 100,000.
That's fine, but if you have a higher yield, then you should be satisfied with that kind of a base. So it's not important for you to have a mass audience on OTT. You can have a sub-base business. But fundamentally, I think OTT services should be sub-led and not really ad-led. But because of the fact that we are not a paying economy, we don't have a choice. You have to create your P&Ls on the basis of AdVOD and not really SVOD.
Yeah, coming back. So will Disney also go in that space, in that direction, in India? Because Discovery is likely to go there. That's been one of the drives going forward.
So we are watching that space. We have our own OTT service in the UK called D-Life. It was launched a year ago. It's about £9 or £10 a month. And it does have a significant amount of pull from a brand perspective. So all the ingredients for a OTT service are there. But I think we want the ecosystem to evolve. I think, like I said, the speeds need to be at a stable state, and I think at the appropriate time, we shall evaluate and take a call.
Okay, coming back now to ARPUs. Do you see these going up, or do you see these struggling around at the levels they are, and the kind of piece that you grab from that ARPU going up for the entire television broadcaster ecosystem?
I mean, everyone hopes ARPUs go up. 10 years back, we had the same ARPU conversation. We're still at $3. It's unfortunate. So the hope is always there. But I think the reality is that in some areas, from a DTH perspective at least, ARPUs have gone up. I mean, I can speak for myself. I pay about $10 a month for a HD pack. So I think the ingredients for taking ARPU up are there. From a broadcaster perspective, it's great quality content, HD service. From a platform perspective, it's service, after-sales service, quality of service, all of that. So it's just the push. And so I think one part of it is going strong. But if you have another part which is in the same ecosystem, challenging at the bottom, then there will be some time when your ARPUs will start going up.
Yeah. And then how do you see the distribution landscape evolving over the next, let's say, I'm going to ask you to do some forecasting over the next 3 years. What do you see, or 5 years? What time frame would you like to look at?
I think as a business, we should evolve into becoming an SWOT business and not an AdWOT business. Globally, the platforms decide whether a channel should actually accept advertising or no. And I can speak to you on behalf of Disney in the West. We decide on the basis of the revenue that we derive from platforms whether we should go AdWOT on the channel or no. So I think overall it should become a subs-driven business. Today I think the ratios are in the 60-40 zone, so 60 advertising, 40 subscription, or maybe 55-45. I think that should change significantly. If that happens, then your viewing experience goes up dramatically. Then your consumer is willing to pay for great content, and you don't have to base your business on advertising alone. This becomes the fundamental, and I hope that happens in the next 5 or 10 years.
My hope is very much with you, as are the hopes of everyone in this audience. Any questions to Nikhil before we move on to the next session? Yeah, please. Can we have a mic up front here?
I feel like a rock star. You are a rock star. Thank you. Nikhil, it's interesting hearing your views on revenue for Disney and the wider market. I'm interested in your view on how that growth can continue with the amount of potential digital piracy that the Indian market faces, with content being available for free. How do you see what the appropriate steps for an organization like Disney moving forward in preventing that kind of loss?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the nuances that every broadcaster faces, unfortunately. But I think as a broadcaster, we are setting up, I mean, I can speak for Disney. We have very stringent norms in terms of anti-piracy steps that we take at our end, and I'm sure all the others do as well. But I think piracy is also the job. Anti-piracy is also the job of the platforms equally, because they are also at an equal loss if the consumer is able to view content without paying for it. And I'm not just talking about broadcast. I'm talking about everything that's available online. One of the things that people anticipate with the whole speeds going up on broadband bandwidth is also piracy. So I think as an industry body, we should come together, create some very strict norms. From a regulatory perspective, also have many, I'd say, penalties for people who indulge in this kind of piracy. So we do have our own views on it. We are speaking to partners as to how they could help us from a technology perspective kill piracy, as well as from a regulatory as well as a ground perspective. We want to set up an anti-piracy unit on our own.
So you offer a service which allows you to actually keep a tab on that, right?
That's right. So slightly self-interested question always from the floor, but
this is a pitch for you to step in.
no, absolutely. I think for
Speak over lunch on that.
absolutely delighted to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Shaji.
I'll just
Sorry,
take
Rahul.
a question, Rahul. You mentioned Frozen, and that kind of set my mind thinking, because be it my tab, be it my phone, be it my better half's phone, the daughter's always watching Frozen, and she watches it multiple number of times. And she wants to buy Frozen once, twice, thrice. Do you see the digital space multiplying your revenue over the years to come with the 3G, 4G, maybe the 5G, really giving a different viewing experience, and the offline hotspots multiplying in numbers? Especially for a content owner like yours, which is...
Absolutely. I think fundamentally digitization should improve commerce, should improve consumption, and not just media. I mean, look at what's happening in the whole shopping experience space. Everything has gone digital now, and the numbers are staggering. So overall, yes, digitization is going to help take the business value up manifold. It does deliver a great amount of convenience. It also delivers a great amount of value. So I think our endeavor is to build on that whole thought process in terms of digitizing all the assets that we have, which we have done already, and make it available across any screen. So if you're on a tab or a phone or your television set at home, you will experience our content at a price.
Great. Shaji, you had a question? Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, Nikhil.
Hi.
You mentioned that pricing should be the prerogative of the broadcaster, and what should the regulator, why should the regulator interfere in that? Today, the pricing of broadcasters is to the platform and not to the consumer. So, did you mean pricing to the platform or to the consumer?
Well, I think if we are given a free hand, stakeholders can come together. Look at what's happening in the other industries. There is an MRP, I know, and you're probably indicating to that. But if you look at the value chain, the retailer gets about 30%, and then you have the wholesaler getting a certain percentage, and the rest of it is kept by the manufacturer. I think it depends on how you want to bring out the structuring. Overall, we've structured and priced as a B2B service, which should change over time, because there is a function of booking as well as steering that happens at the platform level, and exactly like the way it happens in the West. But over time, it's moving. Look at what's happening with the whole skinny bundle activity that's going on in the US. At the end of it, pricing should be collective activity. If you look at what Disney does with Sky in the UK, Sky actually promotes Disney to the consumer. They do promotional activity in terms of bringing out a certain price. Now that is real evolution. So at a fundamental B2B level, if the price structuring can be sorted, the next step would be to take it to the consumer.
If you were given the ability to price whatever you want to price to the consumer, how do you think that would impact the entire distribution scenario?
See, there is a certain legacy. If you put all the RIO rates together, they'll stack up to about $1,500, and we all know that, right? And the real ARPU is about 300, or maybe even lesser, say in some cases even 200. So you have a 85-90% discounting happening straight on the RIO price. Now, there is a lot of legacy that's gone behind it. Now, if we have to really price, I would love to come into an MRP model myself. However, what is the value chain distribution for me to set up? Are the stakeholders agreeing to come up to that kind of pricing? Should we get into a broadband-based pricing where, if you look at broadband, you have a certain amount that you pay to your broadband service provider, and then on the basis of the content pool that I have, you start paying for Netflix separately. In that whole process, the consumer starts valuing content. He starts paying for it. He understands that he's not paying for cable, but he's actually paying for content.
Does it answer your question, Saji? I think it does, right?
Not completely, but this requires a lot of discussion, so I think we can...
Absolutely, it's just not a discussion
Absolutely,
on
yeah.
this platform, but
it's
it
a
needs a
trend in
lot
that
of...
direction, that consumer needs to value content. He doesn't really today. I don't. Our families don't. It's a reality. I don't think your families do. Unless we have to go into a cinema hall to watch, where we'll pay even 700 rupees to watch one film. But when it comes to paying for cable, DTH, we cry. We crib.
There's no price. There's no price. There is no price of what Disney Channel is. There's no price of what Star Plus is. So
there is a price. There is an RIO price, but that's a B2B price. So now I think...
as a consumer.
Yeah. So, and I don't think that's the solution to the problem. I gave you the example of the cable operator coming to my house, right? He told me, don't worry, everything's the same.
Yeah.
So it has to all happen in tandem and in conjunction with that evolution as well.
Yeah, sorry, one more question. I was wanting to ask this question when you said that the cable operator told you, I haven't changed your package, don't worry about it. Isn't that the best answer that he can give? He didn't change your package. You should know what your package is.
I asked him what are the packages available. The answer was, don't worry, everything is the same. Now, I mean, I had a conversation with him after that, and I can tell you what I told him. But the fact of the matter is that we need to push consumers to start asking those questions. If you start giving solace to the fact that your price doesn't change, then I think that's the end of the argument of taking ARPUs up. So I think evolution in conjunction with the fact that he comes with a uniform, this conversation is the most important conversation between the cable operator and the consumer. And I think that's what the platform should push for.
Last question, Sajid. You can catch him at lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably we should understand that the person who comes to change the box is not the one who sells the package.
But he should be trained to answer if you go to the...
It's like asking the refrigerator delivery man, if you ask him what are the prices that you have for other models, he will probably won't give you any answer.
I think the answer is to what you mentioned about the real estate industry and the brokers moving to some kind of evolution in terms of mindset. In my opinion, the cable operator is just a broker. He should be brokering a deal between the broadcaster and the platform and the consumer, and he should be trying to take the price up. So at least give the consumer the fact that he's paying for content and not just for service.
And then you'll be surprised, when I attended this real estate conference in the broker conference in Delhi, there was a separate classroom where brokers were being actually groomed. Trim your nostril hair. Trim the hair on your ears. If you want to be seen as a professional rather than as a person who's just kind of trying to strike a deal. And it comes to how you tuck in your stomach. Everything, they were being trained in that area. So there needs to be a change in the way your frontal face is coming towards a consumer as far as the MSO and LCO is concerned. Because that's the guy, he's not just a collection agent. That's my perspective. And
Let me also give you another perspective. When you call up on the call center for DTH service, on the other end, you'll get a full view of the various packages available, the plethora of services available in terms of HD, and there is always this push of why don't you try this? Why don't you add this onto your pack? Why don't you do something else? So, that's the way forward for me, I think.
Great. Thank you very much, Nikhil. You've been very, very forthright, and you've been extremely supportive of us, and we'll make it up at some stage. Thank you very much.
Anil.
Thank you.